Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Zwick's Flicks, the Ed Zwick podcast. I am your host, Ryan, and with me today, I have another special guest, first-time appearance. Scott, how you doing today? The Reverend, my apologies, the Reverend. Scott, how you doing?
I am fantastic. A real privilege to be on this new podcast of yours. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's a mini series. There is an end in sight, unlike some of my other podcasts that I've done. They've not dragged out, but they have become beasts of their own nature, and excited to do the ones that I do, the Rocky and the Rambos. The Rambo one's retired. It's done. The Rocky one, we're halfway through. But this series, the Zwick's Flicks or Edward Zwick's Films, is definitely designed to be a mini series, one episode for one movie, 13 films in his studio filmography. I kind of like the idea that there's a beginning and an end, and get to have a variety of different guest co-hosts come on and share their thoughts. So, Scott, why don't you just go ahead and plug I know you do a couple of podcasts.
My main podcast is called The Church of Tarantino. It is in its third season, getting close to the end of it. For season 3, we have been covering nothing but aspects of Pulp Fiction for its 30th anniversary release for this year. By the time the season is done, there will be about 45 total episodes. Not all of them dedicated to Pulp Fiction, but 25 of them dedicated to Pulp Fiction. I do a bunch of special anniversary ones and stuff like that in there. And then I have 2 podcasts that I do with my co-host Steve Smith that is on the Last of the Action Heroes podcast network. The first is The Cheeky Bastards Are the Men of Action. We pit basically action movies against each other. We're just about to start. By the time this is heard, we're starting season 3, and we are pitting this season sequels against one another. And we open up with Lethal Weapon 2 versus Die Hard 2.
Lethal Weapon 2. There you go. That's my winner. Done. Next episode.
And then we also do, which is probably why I'm on this episode for this, is I also do with Steve the Dropping a Bruce, where we have been looking at his 40 as I call them, straight to streaming or whatever, but the STDs of his, we are almost halfway through that. So we still got another year and a half to go before we make the 40. There are 40 of them. And then I will be starting a small, kind of what you're doing, a little mini series kind of thing called Kill, Marry, Smash, Eat, where I have a bunch of my friends who I podcast with. We pick a movie or TV series and we decide who from the cast we will kill, marry, smash, and eat. It's just a fun 30, 35 minute. Your Best of the Worst podcast was one of the ones that kind of inspired me to do that fun little venture.
Oh, nice. Well, I'm happy for that. Yeah, thanks for the plug on that one. Check out the Worst of the Best podcast, folks. Yeah, Scott, it's a pleasure to have you on. Indeed, when I reached out to you to do an episode with me on this series, I said, hey, what film do you want? And I was not surprised. And I was happy that you chose The Siege with Bruce Willis because of your coverage of Dropping a Bruce.
Yes.
Again, you are doing the Lord's work, Dropping a Bruce, his straight-to-video movies. They're a tough watch, but you crack them down, you crack wise on them, and poor Bruce. But we're going to talk about peak Bruce this episode. We're talking about peak Bruce. I'm excited. Well, let's get into it.
Yes.
What is your background or fandom regarding Edward Zwick, his filmography? Did you know anything about him before coming on the show?
That's the great thing about your show. So one of my favorite episodes you've done already is Glory. It's my favorite movie of his. Being a Tarantino podcaster and doing some others, is there are some guys who have really big names, right? Like there's the ones that everyone knows. You got your Scorsese's, your Coppolas, your Spielbergs, your Tarantinos. And then there are guys like Ed Zwick, but you don't realize how in-depth his career has really been. And it's not until you do something like this. Like I knew of Glory, but then as I've been listening to yours and going through the filmography, it's like he also did Blood Diamond. You're kind of like, oh my God, I didn't know he did that. You know, it's like, oh, he did The Siege, Courage Under Fire. Like there's a lot of these ones you don't realize he's done. Yeah. But Glory was the one I knew. I absolutely love Glory. Like Glory is one of the greatest war movies ever made. It's an absolute gem. I was so surprised to listen to your episode and find out just how shitty Matthew Broderick's mom is. Like, holy shit.
That was fun. That was a fun discovery. Yeah, I did not know that.
What a fuck. You were very polite. I would have called it far worse things than you guys did.
Try to channel the energy that Ed channels when he's giving the stories that
he was so very calm about that.
Right. He's at peace now, but during the time he did say, like I mentioned that when he did the his book that he
Mhm.
says, I'm going to tell some stories, but I'm not telling them out of anger. It's just a history. This is what I went through. This is what I experienced. But as of right now, I'm at zen with it and life is fine. But this is what I went through. But he shared that story about Matthew and his mom. Very interesting stuff. Have you seen the other films, of course, like Legends of the Fall that we covered? Have you?
So
Oh,
I want to preface this. I saw Legends of the Fall when I was 19 years old. Okay.
Perfect age. That's a great age. I think we're the same age. What year are you born?
Yeah, I was born in late 75. I literally should be born in 76. I am 3 weeks before 76 starts.
Okay.
So I was born December 11th of 75. So, I mean, and again, I want to preface anyone who's listening, and especially if Kay is listening to, I know she loves that movie.
Sure.
I hated it. I was tired of Brad Pitt riding off on that fucking horse that if he rode off anymore. Now, I'm not saying the scenery wasn't beautiful, but again, this is 19-year-old Scott. You know, right? So this
You're
is
a little jealous. You're a little bit jealous of the Brad, I think.
I was just like, oh my God, this guy, if we had to see his hair flow in the wind, I know right now I'm bald, but like, I'm so tired of watching.
Maybe that's why you're bald.
Maybe
the gods of Brad struck your hair.
Probably. But I have to admit that I have to give it a reappraisal because a 19-year-old watching it and not enjoying it. And look, I'll also be honest, this came out shortly after Pulp Fiction came out. And also you've got Shawshank. So there were some movies that I had probably fallen in love with more and probably was a little bit jaded in my viewing of the movie and not giving it probably its just due. So I will this week rewatch it and be fair to it because I realized it today. I was listening to it in the car. I was like, I was 19. Like, I got to go back. That was a long time ago. It was 30 years ago. I got to go back and give this a fair shot because 19-year-old Scott and 48-year-old Scott, they're different people.
Well, absolutely. Of course. I mean, I've watched two of his films now that I would not have watched back when they came out. Of course, we covered Leaving Normal and About Last Night. I didn't watch those films back when I was a teenager or around that age when they came out because of what I thought of what they were going to be like. But yeah, as an older individual now, you can go back and watch films in a different lens and light and life experiences. But yeah, you'll still see a lot of sweeping hair and stuff. But I would give it you have to give it a rewatch. There's more to that film than sweeping hair, I assure you.
Yes, there probably is. All I remember is always being angry about him riding off. I remember looking at my buddy and go, this rides off one more time. I'm walking out of the theater. But again, I was 19. But to other movies like The Last Samurai, Blood Diamond,
right.
The movie we're going to talk about today, like I'm thankful for you starting this.
Hey, man.
Just like with Craig starting his about
Brian De Palma.
De Palma. And when you look back at some of these, you look at the totality of their filmographies, you realize, oh my God, like it's sometimes the films, unfortunately for some directors, the film is bigger than who they are. And so you lose who they are when they come out. And then it's not until you get something like this, or unfortunately, when they pass away, right? Like usually we have like a director will pass away, and then you start to look back at the filmography and you go, "Oh my God, I didn't realize that they made this film or this was in their catalog." Like the Scorsese, like I said, the big names we always know, but it's these other guys who I don't think get as much appreciation. So,
agreed.
Podcasts like this and what Craig is doing, it's really, really awesome and commendable for you guys because. As a film buff, it gives me a chance to now also go, oh crap, that's right. I want to check out this film. I didn't realize.
That's what we hope. That's what we hope. Yeah. Well, great. I'm glad. And it was actually Craig's Brian De Palma podcast that got me this totally. I think I gave him the shout at the very first episode because I was like, it was his idea. Like, oh crap, I love that idea. So here we are, Zwix Flicks. Now we're going to talk about The Siege. Came out in 1998. Did you see this in the theaters or did you see it later on VHS? Do you recall?
I do believe I saw this in the theaters. However, my recollection for it is going to tie in really nicely to why we're talking about this today as well. You're in the military currently.
Right.
I was in the military when 9/11 happened. I was a military policeman, and my unit was sent to guard the Pentagon 3 months after 9/11 happened as it was being rebuilt. And there was a lot of belief and rumor that there was going to be like there was going to be attacks in the city kind of thing. Kind of like what we see happen in this film. Our commander rented this movie on the bus we took up. So we had a long drive from Fort Benning, Georgia, up to Washington, D.C. We watched this on the bus. And this is where I actually remember most vividly remember seeing this, is watching this film again on the bus as we went up. And it was kind of chilling to now rewatch it again. It's been a long time. I think it's been since that bus ride.
Probably.
Since I've seen it. And this was the number one rented movie, at least in America, after 9/11, which
It's
is
amazing.
so wild. Yeah.
With this podcast, we don't go plot by plot. That's not what we're doing.
Yes.
People can watch the film on their own. We will talk about plot pieces. We'll talk about the actors. We'll talk about things that we like that they did in the film, but we'll go all over the plot when we do that. I don't want to give the synopsis is pretty simple. It's a terrorist attack in New York. The city's held under siege. Martial law is given. People are rounded up because they look a certain way, and they're trying to get terrorists from that group of people. That's basically the plot of the film. And I think we should talk about it. This film wasn't very quote unquote big at the box office, and a part of it was the criticism from some groups of people and their organizations saying this was anti this and anti that. I mean, it was made for 70 million. It did 120 million at the box office. So, it made a little bit of money. It wasn't, it didn't take money away from they probably broke even at the end of the day. But yes, the DVD sales or the VHS rentals after 9/11 probably got all their money back and then some.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Let's talk about it, because this is the bread and butter of the situation here. This film depicted, I think, very accurately how a country like the US might act in this situation where you have terrorists. Let's talk about the bus scene right away at the beginning of the film. There's a bus scene held by hostages that we don't really ever see. You always see it's greatly filmed. We never see the hostages. We never see them make the demands or even hear their demands with Denzel's character on the phone. We don't even see who they are. All we see are the hostages plastered up against the windows, like pleading with their eyes, get us out of this situation. They're up against the glass of the bus. And they let the children go. So you, the viewer, like, oh, cool. They've let the children go. How amazing is that? Great. Okay, cool. And it is so well done when they say, let's let the old people go. And they're coming out of the bus, and then the bus blows up. And I thought that was well done by the moviegoers, because it's shocking. It's sad. It is shocking. It's because we're thinking, okay, now the Hallelujah are going to go.
Especially for 1998, right? Yes. Like in 1998, when this film comes out, this is, America, the worst thing that's happened so far in America, outside of like an attack, by Pearl Harbor by the Japanese. But that was a war, that was a war effort at that moment. Yeah. But was Oklahoma City, which had happened. It was in 95. So it's 3 years earlier. So we're 3 years from that. And so that was homegrown terrorism. For the listeners who are of our age will remember even before, because I think it was at 92 was the first attack on the trade centers where they tried to bomb it from underneath. Just like you said about Yellowstone having to have watched the Legends of the Fall. I feel like the writer of this definitely used the 92 bombing that wasn't successful as a basis, a jumping off point for what they were going to tell with this story. But in those 90s, late 90s through the 2010s, like while we were at war, there was a real sense that we were going to join the community of Europe and the Middle East and Africa of being the brethren of having terrorist attacks on their soil. When it failed, and then we had the Oklahoma City bombing, it was a weird time here, especially in America, because the Cold War was over. So the enemy for the longest time was the Russians. We're like, oh, we're afraid of Russia. We were not afraid of any terrorist attacks. We were more afraid that Russia or China would invade us or something like that. And then once that imminent threat or enemy is gone, there's always a vacuum. And all of a sudden, sometimes, especially here in America, we have created our own enemies. We have a lot of times as they talk about in this film, where we train people, or we've got, we were part of the Mujahideen. We were helping the Afghanis fight the Russians, and then we left them behind, just like they're kind of using in this. And so then that kind of creates Osama bin Laden. I went to Iraq. ISIS is started by the upheaval we created in that region with Iraq. So sometimes, especially in America, we seem to be creating a lot of our enemies as of late. And so this movie and that scene was palpable because it was for the first time we were actually kind of seeing what's going to happen, what it could be like. Who could have guessed that 3 years later it was going to be worse than this? If you could have chosen, you would have chosen this over what came. But what I love about it as a filmmaker's perspective is Zwick never brings us up to them. Other directors will give us more of a, we need to feel sorry for the faceless people there in front of us on the bus. We never see them except from where they are. And what it does is it makes us, we're now in Denzel's spot. We're trying to get closer without getting too close. So we can only see what he can see. And I love that we're kept at that distance. The little trick that it's such a great, smart play, letting the kids out makes everyone in the audience go, okay, all right. Yeah. they're not going to hurt the kids. And they think, why don't we just let the old people out? When the doors open again, you're like, okay. And then, no, boom, we blow everybody up. At that moment in the film, you realize, okay, this is going to be more realistic. This is not just going to be some John Wayne where the good guys always win, which there are a few of those scenes in here, but it's going to be more of, man, we're going to be on our back foot the whole time, and the terrorists are really running things. And I think it gives you as a viewer, back then, especially because now we're well versed in how this goes after 9/11. But back then, it was giving you this sense of, oh, this is what it's really like with terrorism. Like, it's not like you're trying to talk someone down who's having a mental breakdown and they've got people at gunpoint in the house, and we got negotiators who are going to talk the situation down. And I think that's even handled like that by Denzel Washington's character. He thinks he's going to be able to talk him down. And he actually feels confident when the kids come out. Yeah. He's almost like, I've got this. Yeah. That's why he starts to get, calm and approach the bus. And then Zwick and the filmmakers pull the rug out from under our feet and the actors. And we all of a sudden realize we're in for a long, dark ride.
It doesn't pull any punches. It doesn't cater to the audience. It doesn't cater to both sides. I think it's showcasing that there is a group of people that, this is tough. You do a movie about Nazi Germany, and nobody seems to. I don't know why this is. I don't know how this works, and I don't want to speak on a turn here. But like we watch the Indiana Jones movies, and they have the Nazi soldiers, and Andy punches them in the face, and he throws them over the plane or shoots them up, and nobody bats an eye and says, "Oh, those terrible Nazis! They were terrible." And of course, they were German too. But we recognize as Germans that not all Germans are Nazis, but all Nazis were German. And
well, not anymore, but yes, I know what you mean.
But you know what I'm saying.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah,
there's always an exception to every rule, but the point is, like, everyone that was an SS soldier was German. And of course, there was people within Germany that hated that regime, did not like. But what I'm getting at is, it seems like there's a group of people where they will declare a war on another group of people when they come from that country. I should say, not everyone in that country feels that way, but the people that are causing the damage come from that country. So this is where and I'm being vague on purpose because I'm not trying to point out any one race or nationality, because I'm saying if you had a bunch of Canadians in the US pounding on the White House, let's say, and we're like, we had guns or we had bombs and we're attacking, let's say, you had Canadians attacking the White House or downtown New York, you would then say, well, gee, not every Canadian are these terrorists, but all the ones that are doing this right now have claimed to be from Canada. So we kind of might have to round them up somehow. So how do you round up a bunch of white guys who look like Canadians with flannel shirts? I don't know. But the point is, this is the tricky part.
You tell them that hockey sucks. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, that's right.
We got them.
That's right. So the ones that freak out.
That's them.
I'm not trying to be glib here, but the reality is that this film delves into that sensitive talk with saying, hey, we have a group of people who have declared themselves war on our territory, on our sovereign soil. How do we gather them up? And it's a great push and pull from the film, from the Denzel character, from the Bruce Willis character. You have the military perspective, you have the humanitarian perspective. Both sides are given equal play. The pros and cons of both sides. Some of it works, some of it doesn't work. So what I love about this film, it doesn't go USA hurrah, hurrah, or the holy war that these people have declared is all evil either. They really showcase that there are great people who live within your nation, that come from those countries, that are living great lives, that are on the FBI themselves. And it's an interesting study on this very complicated situation. So again, folks, see the film to see how it plays out. But let's talk about some of the players of this film. We talked about Edward Zwick, of course. I'd forgotten this. Now, Lance Reddick was in this film, and you probably recognize him. He, of course, was in the John Wick films. When he plays the hotel guy in the John Wick films.
And he just recently passed.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did recently pass, and it's heartbreaking because he's an actor that I've enjoyed in so much stuff. So John Wick films he was big in those. He was in some TV shows.
He's in The Wire.
The Wire. Yep. And speaking of The Wire, Wood Harris had a cameo in this. Did you recognize him? Okay.
Yep.
He's also in the Creed films. He had a nice early role in this film. He's also in Oz, of course, The Wire. He was in Lost. Bosch Legacy, the Bosch TV show, which I love. My wife and I watched those. So he was actually had a couple episodes come out after he passed, and I told my wife, as watching, like, yeah, that guy just died. Like, it sucks. Yeah. Great actor, and he was great in this very kind of semi-small role. He had a few speaking parts. He was Denzel's right hand man. He died in the explosion there at the end there, with the terrorist explosion at the end there.
The nice thing, I guess, with age is when you re-look at these films, you get to look back on guys who you now know. Like back then when he was in that film, he was just a bit actor that you'd probably seen someone else before. But again, Denzel's in this movie, so when Denzel moves or takes a dump, you're watching Denzel. Like you're pulled to Denzel. But some of these other great girls, I forget the one gentleman who also passed. I think his name was Danny in the film. He was on The Sopranos. So there's some guys who come in and out of this film who you've seen before.
Yeah.
And it's not until you get further down the road from when it originally comes out that you start to recognize, oh, yeah, that's right. These guys were also like their path to now stardom that we know, like the Wick films, started way, way back in 1998 for him. And then, he would then make it into The Wire and make it onto these other shows and these other projects. And so it was nice to see him again. It was like, oh, that's right. It's almost like you get to see his career in retrospect now that he's passed, and you get a chance to be like, damn, he's been good ever since. And I'll be honest, he still looked. I mean, I know still looked the same age then as he did.
It's weird,
recently.
Man.
So I can't tell if he was old then or if he was just young now. Like it was just
he didn't die old.
Great.
He wasn't old when he passed. So he's just. I know he's just got that look to him where he's
almost like was it the Dick Clark? He just doesn't seem to age. He's just like this timeless look for him.
Yeah, he died at the age of 60.
That's young. I mean, in modern days, it's very young. Yeah.
Yeah. Of health complications, of course. Yeah, he died at 60. So he was born in 62. So he was 36. He looked great. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. David Provo is the guy you're talking about. That's on The Sopranos. Yeah. He's got that face when you see him. Like, oh, yeah, that guy. That guy. All right. So the big four here. We've got Tony Shalhoub.
Yes,
of course, who played Monk on the TV show there. What did you think of Tony in this film?
Love Tony. I've always loved Tony. Tony's a great actor, and I'll be honest with you, I wasn't 100% sure. I knew Shalhoub was probably an Arab name or possibly a Palestinian name, but I wasn't 100% sure. So I actually last night while I'm watching it was Wikipediaing him to see what his nationality was, and he actually is because his Arabic was very believable, and I was like, that doesn't sound like a dialect coach. That sounds like a man who has actually spoken Arabic before. I thought he was great, and outside eyes might say, "Oh, okay, yeah, we've got to have an Arab guy on the thing." But I think we did. We needed someone because what this story is telling, it is a very tough story because we're no longer in a time frame, or at least the enemies we've either created or are dealing with. There's no more uniforms. So, like you said with the SS, so yeah, we could say, "F those Nazis," right? We could say that because we saw them, we knew who they were, they had the uniform. But now it's very hard to tell. You've been overseas, the general population, pick out the bad guy. You don't know until it happens. Tony Shalhoub was able to give us the idea because his son, when they basically turned America into World War II time, when we did on the West Coast, what we did the Japanese. Once Pearl Harbor happened, we rounded up all Japanese, all Asian immigrants. So I'm pretending it's just Japanese. Anyone who was Asian was literally put into these camps. In the West Coast, their businesses were taken from them and never to be returned to them, even though they were U.S. citizens. Like there's a lot of terrible things that happened during that time frame. They kind of get swept under the rug. And I like that they kind of brought it a little bit to light what it was like, but then just put in the East Coast. When you're rounding up all the Muslims from Brooklyn, his son gets taken and he's an FBI agent and they won't release him. And Bruce Willis is like, I'll look into it, which means, as we know in the military, it's not happening. Right. If your commanding officer says, I'll look into it, that means go F yourself. It's not happening. Right. Nothing's going to change. So to have Tony in there and him be a part of it, also showing you can't paint a broad brush with all the Muslims. He's an American citizen. He was a immigrant living there 20 years, now an American citizen, working 10 years for the Bureau of Investigation on terrorism. It just shows that don't judge a book by its cover kind of thing. But to have him, he was a central key figure because we don't get to know what it's like, what he's going through. Because otherwise now we have to introduce a new character who doesn't make sense to, right? Because we need to know what he's going to see from first person perspective, that he's as affected by what's going on as the people that it's is happening to. So I thought he did a great job. And when you're the second, maybe the third to Denzel, and you're holding your own, that's probably why he got the show Monk and stuff, because he stood his own with one of the greats ever in Denzel.
Absolutely. He was great. And I think it is a little bit I would say it's an obvious it's almost too obvious that, of course, Denzel's partner happens to be, but they did that. It's a story point, meaning they just wanted to showcase how this affects even an FBI agent or a cop, but so for the story purposes, we couldn't cut to another person across the city, whatever profession. They had to keep them close to the main storyline, but still tells the story of how the average family, so to speak, are still being affected by this rounding up of Muslim kids and teenagers and adults or whatever. So yes, it happens to be the character, but it's just showing you this is happening to people, but we can't, have 5 different stories. If it was like a mini series, sure, you could have a different family, showcasing their storyline, but for the sake of a 2-hour movie, you have to have this character close to Denzel's character to see that story be told.
He's in the terrorism part. So it's, if he was in counterfeiting, he might be like, okay, now we're really just shoehorning a character in for the purposes. But it does make a little more sense that there would be someone of Palestinian descent who is working in the terrorism part of FBI. It makes sense why he was brought in. He knows the area. He knows the people. He would know the language. It would be a person who could get them connections that they don't have. Like a person like me, a white man like me, is not going to be able to embed themselves or get information from a tight-knit group of people that I have, one, a language barrier, and also don't have any, reference of.
To play devil's advocate just a little bit, you could argue. I mean, you could argue if you want to talk about we'll get to the Bruce character last. By the way, we're going to save him for last. When you get to his character, he's this general. He's the general, he's the war mind of the U.S. government. His character just represents the war machine. That's his character's representation, just how the military will handle things. It is the broad brush. There is no feelings on the matter. It's just we have to get this job done, whether you like it or not. The feelings be damned.
Yeah.
That is a tactic that it has its place, and there's a reason why the military is the military, and it's not Sunday school. But what I'm getting at is, you could argue, well, maybe the best candidate for a terrorist is the son of an FBI agent. That's the thing. So just to play devil's advocate, just because your daddy is in the FBI counterterrorism, that's the perfect one to rebel against his father and authority. So
there's a little bit of that turn in this film.
There is a turn in that film. It's a great ending, so we don't really want to spoil that ending.
I won't say nothing yet.
I always say that I think you can listen to our shows, even when we talk about plot points, because we do go over the place that the story's told better than we do. Our job is not to tell the story per se; it's for you to just to listen to us talk about the movie. Okay, Tony did a great job. Let's get to Denzel, because this is the third episode that I've talked about Denzel. So I've already given a lot of thoughts regarding Denzel, regarding Glory. We talked about that on then Courage on the Fire when I did that episode. Of course, a lot of Denzel talk, but this is your first time on the show. So what are your overall feelings on Denzel Washington as an actor in his films?
He is bar none one of the greatest, top 5, if not top 3 ever to do it. So there's a lot of great actors, but you've got your character actors, you got all kinds of different people. But as far as leading men, he's the Meryl Streep of male actors, in my opinion.
Yeah,
like
that's good.
Whatever he's in, you're watching. Whatever he is, you just believe it. He emotes so much emotion. He emotes so much. The single tear, like you said, in Glory, the blood running out of his nose after being a part of the bomb, and he's talking and he's delivering the speech, and you're just so invested in what he says and what he's doing. You believe every moment. It's Denzel, but you forget it's Denzel, and that's hard for amazing actors to do, right? Like when Sean Connery's on screen, it's Sean Connery, and I don't mean that in a mean, disparaging way. Sure. It's Sean Connery, right? Like you go, hey, it's Sean Connery, and you're like, all right, what's he going to do today? But when Denzel takes a job, it's Denzel. You're going to see it because it's Denzel, and then you forget it's Denzel, and you believe he's King Kong ain't got nothing.
King Kong ain't got shit on me.
You know what I mean? You believe everything he's doing, no matter what character he plays, whether he's a good guy, a bad guy, he's tough, he's soft. It doesn't matter. He's a slave. He's the head of the FBI terrorist organization or a terrorist task force in New York City. You just believe Denzel. I absolutely love watching Denzel.
Yeah.
We're getting up in age, and there's going to come a time. Yeah. But I mean, he's going to be out soon in the new Gladiator 2. And
which looks great, by the way.
Because he's in it. Like, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, he looks
because he's in it. People are like, we're going to go see this movie. And because that Denzel is going to deliver. He could read the phone book and you would be absolutely mesmerized by it. So I don't know if that gave you enough for how much I love Denzel.
No,
I really do love Denzel.
I love him too. And I thought he did a fantastic job in this film. I think Ed and Denzel, this is their third and final film to
Mhm.
work together. I was thinking, man, I wish they did more together, because I think they seem to have some sort of, Edward just seems to know how to allow Denzel to be Denzel. They have a very good relationship, working relationship. And it's too bad they never connected again over the years. I think Denzel just got bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, he just went on to such big things. And not to say that Edward Zwick, couldn't handle big personalities. Of course, he does Tom Cruise in 2 films later in our series. We'll get to that. It would have been interesting to see more of Ed and Denzel. This is Denzel's third movie with Edward Zwick. All have a war theme, which I thought was interesting too. And this one, though, I think is his best acting of the 3 films. And even though Glory was amazing, he won an Academy Award for Glory, but I feel like this film, he has a few scenes, but there is a scene, of course, it's the torture scene where they've got the captive.
Oh, yeah.
And Denzel, this is what I love about this film, because we have these conflicting ideals about how do we handle prisoners getting information, torture. And of course, this is something that was echoed, as you said, later after post 9/11. Torture, Guantanamo Bay, and this stuff was a real thing, a real hot topic. We have Bruce Willis's character saying, look, it's better this one guy perished than hundreds perished. Like, let's pull off his fingernails to get information out of this guy. And there's a part of you like, yeah, I understand. Logic, I logically understand. If it meant my daughter wasn't going to get blown up at school, if he pulled off this guy's finger, so be it.
Yeah.
So it's tough. Like, where do we put the value of one human life over 100? And Denzel's speech is delivering his reasons in that scene. It's just amazing. And the way I've seen it like 10 times in a row on YouTube, you can watch it. And he's just, the way he acts is just so Denzel.
Are you people insane? What are you talking about?
The time has come for one man to suffer in order to save hundreds of lives.
One man. What about 2? Huh? What about 6? How about public executions, huh?
Feel free to leave whenever you like, Agent Hubbard.
Come on, General, you lost, man. I've lost, man, but you can't do this. What if what they really want, what if they don't even want to shake? Have you considered that? Huh? What if what they really want is for us to herd children in the stadiums like we're doing? And put soldiers on the street and have Americans looking over their shoulders, bend the law, shred the Constitution just a little bit. Because if we torture him, General, we do that, and everything that we have bled and fought and died for is over. And they've won. They've already won.
Man, that guy, he can deliver. And you'll catch when Bruce Willis's character scored him out of the torture room. Denzel sits on the sink. I don't know if you caught that. So he's been told to leave, but he sits down. He sits down on the sink as the soldiers come to him, and they go to kind of grab him, not like roughly, but to grab his arm to lead him out of the bathroom. He whips up his arm. Like, don't you freaking touch me. The way he
I wonder if the other actor knew it was coming. You know what I mean? Because I love it. Throws that arm off. Like,
I wonder too, like, was that scripted? Did Ed tell Denzel, I want you to sit on the... I don't think so. I think it was Denzel, and I think that was all improv. I guarantee you that wasn't written. I want you to do it this way. That was just Denzel taking the scene and making it his own. Yeah, we can't say enough good things about Denzel, but unfortunately, it's kind of sad because this is the third film I got to talk about Denzel, and now it's over. This is it.
He has those moments. Like, he did stuff with Tony Scott. Like, he does have these moments of like falling in love with the director and then moving on to another director, which is why we love Denzel. It's because you just never know what you're going to get when you get it. Another scene that I liked of him, it's when he arrests Annette Bening when they go into the house where she's picked up.
The first time they meet?
Yeah. The first time they officially meet. Yeah.
Right.
Because they meet before and then they meet officially when he shows up there.
When
he takes a seat in the chair and he just...
Come on, share something with me, Elise. Enlighten me. You can tell me now, you can tell me downtown.
One phone call and he's mine. You know the number. I have about...
You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. That's what you also have.
Come on. Hey, do you have any idea what you're starting here? What kind of shitstorm this could turn into?
Obstruction of justice, assault. Get her out of here.
I love swarmy, kind of cocky, like dickhead Denzel too. Like, because he can do that so well. Like, it's almost like if you want to fuck with me, he shows you like it's like that. It's the old saying, "Fuck around and find out." And it's kind of like that's how Denzel is in a lot of his movies. Is if you mess with him, you're gonna find out what that is going to entail later down the road. So. His little banter with the net is really amazing. Is there not a character or when he's in a film that he doesn't seem to have a good rapport with? I mean, he could hate that person for all we know in real life. Like, they could hate each other on set, but as soon as the director yells action, you buy every interaction he's ever had with anybody, whether it's a good one, a bad one. Like you said, he threw that arm off. I'm sure, like you said, it was completely ad-libbed, but you could feel his disdain for that guy, even thinking about putting his hands on him to remove him from the thing. And the other scene at the end when he and there's the showdown. It's the Mexican standoff between the FBI and the soldiers, and he's like, "Give him the order, General. Go ahead, make him murder." It's like,
If I serve my country, why don't you try serving yours? You have anything else, Agent Hubbard?
Yeah, one more thing. This is a writ from the U.S. District Court ordering the release of all persons being held in this stadium.
My authority overrules the courts.
Your authority ends now, General. William Devereaux, you are under arrest for the torture and murder of Tariq Husseini, an American citizen.
Just some kind of a joke.
You see me laughing, General?
Order your men to lower their weapons, Hubbard.
Can't do that, General.
Do it now.
The law states, I am the law. Right here, right now, I am the law. You have the right to remain silent, General. You have the right to a fair trial. You have the right not to be tortured, not to be murdered. Rights that you took away from Tariq Husseini. You have those rights because of the men that came before you who wore that uniform. Because of the men and women that are standing here right now waiting for you to give them the order to fire. Give them the order, General.
Do you think that I would hesitate to kill you or every other federal agent in this room if I thought it was in the best interest of my country?
No, you wouldn't hesitate. I know that, but they might.
Oh man, like as a Bruce Willis fan too, like at that time, Bruce Willis had never been in a film really where he'd been like talked down to like that, right? Like even in Pulp Fiction, we got Marcellus Wallace being the antagonist, but even in that, he still rises above everything. He's the one who saves him at the end. In this film, Bruce isn't John McClane. In 1998, that's a kind of a weird thing to see for the first time because, he hasn't really had that transformation yet in his career where he
did a little bit. He played the bad guy in The Jackal the year previous. So he was dabbling a little bit.
But this one is but he's supposed to be this like you feel like he's an American hero kind of thing, So it's a weird thing for him to not be the official bad guy of the movie. And that's the other thing this movie does a great job of is we pivot on who the bad person is or who we are perceived to be the bad person. I forget who said it. There's someone famous who said that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. It's, the funny old, there were, contractors working on the Death Star when they blow them up. But there is something to be said about that. There's cafeteria workers on the Death Star who died and everyone's like cheering. There's a dance floor. It's like people have been blown to bits. So
I know. I just work here.
It's all perspective. Exactly.
I gotta clean. Someone's got to clean the toilets. It's not an evil janitor. He's just
he hates his job as much as you do.
Yeah, he hates working for the Empire, but he's got a family to feed.
He's like these stormtroopers can't. No one can anybody. They can't hit the fucking toilet. They're pissing everywhere.
Yeah, they don't want to be a part. They're trying to lose. They want to lose. They want Vader to be outed. Yeah, for sure. That's funny. Before we get into the last two actors of the film, the main two actors of the film, let's go over a little bit of trivia, shall we?
Sure.
The film initially was going to be called Holy War. That would have been maybe a little bit too on the nose, maybe. Yeah. Another one was Against All Enemies. That one's all right.
It's not bad. It's vague. It's better than Holy War because it wasn't really a holy war. Someone got disappeared off the face of the earth by the United States military because they blew up an army barracks. So there's this back and forth of good, bad, and they holding him for whatever reasons they decided to hold him. And now his supporters are going to raise hell in New York City until they get him released. And so it just becomes that, like, are we meddling in affairs we shouldn't? Should we have just arrested? Like, there's a whole geopolitical subplot that is kind of like just quietly, which I think is probably best for the film. We just kind of push that to the side. This film could have gotten mired in a whole lot of stuff that would have bogged it down and not made it the film that it truly is. But
yeah, I think we already said it, but I want to say it again, and maybe we didn't say it very well, but to the point that I think Ed and the gang did a great job of exploring all sides of the issue. But there was no real good or bad. That it's just complicated. Humans are complicated, and it just depends what side of the world you're born on.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
It's tricky. It's a tricky thing, my friends. So what I like about this title, though, Against All Enemies, unlike a Holy War, obviously one nation says Holy War over another nation, but Against All Enemies, what I like about that title is, who? We're all enemies. against all enemies.
When you swear in Canada, I don't know what you're swearing in,
Yes.
but for soldiers here, you swear to protect the Constitution against all enemies, both
That's right.
foreign and domestic. So I think the against all
Yeah.
enemies is leaning towards what Denzel's talking about. Is like,
domestic.
yes, the foreign ones are the ones who've come over and are bombing, but now the domestic one seems to possibly be Bruce Willis's character, who is having his own war on the streets of New York City and doing his own thing. So against all enemies, and they might have had to. Again, it's a little thing they could have shown someone swearing in or whatever, to help.
That's
that
cool. I like
sell,
that.
yeah.
I've seen that, of course, in movies with you guys saying that in those movies and stuff. It was later, though, became the title of a post 9/11 nonfiction book, all the same, Against All Enemies. So I think The Siege works. According to an interview that screenwriter Lawrence Wright gave to CBS in 2007, the film initially performed poorly at the box office. We mentioned that. But Wright attributed this failure to protests from Muslim and Arab communities who picketed theaters in response to the film's portrayal of Muslims and Arabs as terrorists, which they felt perpetuated harmful stereotypes. Then, of course, we mentioned that there was a resurgence of popularity with the post 9/11. Ed talks about in his book, he did share in his book that when he did come with this film, he felt this backlash from people, and he kind of felt a little bit of a sort of like a pariah, but he said he went from pariah to prophet. After 9/11 happened, all the same people that called him terrible for doing this almost hailed him a hero for predicting it. Is that odd?
I know. The Twin Towers make an appearance 3 times in the actual film.
Sure.
Most eerie is when Bruce Willis's character is standing near the Brooklyn Bridge with Lower Manhattan behind him, which has the 2 towers behind him. So you've got the Brooklyn Bridge. I mean, look, this is a well set up shot. Like, come on. I mean, if you're gonna get some iconography of New York City, this is how you do it. But it's set up where you've got the Brooklyn Bridge, and you can also see the Twin Towers as he's declaring martial law on especially the borough of Brooklyn. It felt eerie to me last night. I got some chills when I watched it because 3 years later, they're gone.
Crazy.
3 years later, I mean, it's just
That's
like
not very
the
long.
stuff they're talking about, it's gone. It's
not very long, man. 3 years is not a long time.
No.
It's insane how close these two events happen. Yeah, I mean, the video was probably on DVD or VHS for like a couple of years after its theatrical run, if you think about it. So this was like just past the new release point on VHS shelves by the time 9/11 happened. All right, one last piece of trivia before we go back to the actors. You mentioned Star Wars. There was a bit of a box office bump because of the Phantom Menace. This is pre-internet. Right now we have trailers all the time on YouTube and what have you. But back then, 1998, the internet was kind of still your dial-in modem. You're waiting, 5 minutes for that nipple to show. There was no real movie trailers the way we see today. So people wanted to see the new Phantom Menace. 16 years they've been waiting for a new Star Wars film. They wanted to see that. Even then, they wanted to see it on the big screen, not some pixelated screen at home. So they bought tickets because they knew or had heard. I don't know how you get word of this because I don't even know what.
Because one person goes to the movie and says it, and that's back when water cooler talk was a real big thing. You talked about things around the water cooler. People passed it on. It was the old communal sitting around the campfire telling stories type of thing. That's how we used to pass things around to each other.
No, I also heard a lot of people left the theater in some of these situations. Why would you leave? Just watch the movie. You've bought it. Why not watch? Are Star Wars fans not able to watch?
I'm a Star Wars fan, but they're some of the worst freaking goddamn fandom there ever is. They're awful. And I don't mean to be mean, but you just go on the internet. They troll people. They can't handle if women are in something, if people of the different color, which is odd because you've got all the different aliens painted up different color. Like, it's a great fandom, but it's also the shittiest fandom that's out there. So
I agree.
Yeah, so this doesn't surprise me at all that no one would do it nowadays with the prices of tickets. No one's throwing $16 to see just a trailer.
That's just the fandom. They waited 16 years to see some new footage. I get it. Here's $5, $8. I want to watch the new footage, go home. But I suspect a good portion still stuck around to watch the movie. But so maybe some of that box office bump was from that. I saw this in the theaters. I should have said that. I did see this in the theaters. So I probably saw the Phantom Menace trailer and I was probably excited by it. But I stuck around and watched the film all the same. Okay, let's move on to our next actress. I shouldn't mention ages here, but we have Annette Bening. Annette Bening is one of my favorite actresses. I love Annette Bening. I've always have. I guess you could say I've had a MILF crush on her throughout my life.
Wow.
I love her look. I love her short hair.
She's very sexy in this film.
She's 40. Yeah. She's 40 in this film.
The next year, I believe in 99, she comes out with American Beauty, correct? Where she also got like an Academy Award nomination. I don't know if she won for that or not, but the very next year, she's on another high pedestal.
Yeah, she's great. I love her. To me, she's kind of like a Kate Blanchett type personality, which I also I know I'm allowed to have celebrity crushes. There's a few actresses that they're very, I don't know how regal's the word, but they're very like the way they are. Like I think Meryl Streep's fantastic, and I think she's a great actress, but I don't think I've ever had a crush on her. She's a lovely woman, don't get me wrong, and I love her, but there's something about Annette Bening that I've just always loved since I was a young lad, and I've enjoyed her films, Bugsy and things like that, and bless Warren Beatty's heart to getting her, and they're still together. They're still together as a couple. It's fantastic. Yeah, she was great in this film. What did you think of Annette Bening in this film?
Just, mesmerized by her. I don't want to gush too much on Denzel, as your buddy said. I don't want to be washing his balls.
Yeah, we'll leave that to Doug.
The actors and actresses in this film, especially the main four, well, the really three, Tony and her really do most of the scene work with Denzel.
Sure.
And Denzel he's really starting to work into his powers because he's just 3 years away after the 9/11 we're talking about, but he's 3 years away from getting his other Academy Award for Training Day.
Yeah.
So Denzel is a big star.
He's 43 in this film. Both him and Bruce are 43 in this film, by the way.
Wow. These other actors, Annette Bening's no schlub by any means, but they are able to hold the screen just as well as Denzel. They're able to not be sucked into the black hole of his charisma and his magnetism and who he is. And I thought she was great. They go toe to toe with each other. She's very seductive at moments. Like she really plays this great CIA person who's kind of like walking between the two worlds dangerously, very dangerously. And she sells every second of it. The only thing that was disappointing is the ending of the film for her. She expired pretty quickly for a gut shot wound, is all I'm saying. She was.
Well, she's a woman, so
He said it, folks.
I'm just joking. Everyone, don't turn off your dial.
Welcome to Zwick's Dick's Flicks.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, Dick Flicks.
That was the only part of the film I was kind of like, that was kind of quick. I was like, she got shot in the gut.
I guess you just don't want to drag it out. Like,
I get it.
She died from a mortal gun. We don't want to say who or how got her, so that's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was killed at the end there, and she was great. I think you nailed it by saying you as a viewer is like, is she kind of a bad guy? Is she a liar?
Yeah.
Who's she lying to? Is she lying to her informant? Is she lying to Denzel? Is she lying to everyone? But
then she's got a different name at one point. I didn't realize her real name, Yeah,
it's great. She did a great job. It was a classic 90s femme fatale, which I love. I love the Sharon Stone from Basic Instinct type. It was just that without being like,
I was gonna say, without being like, she was allowed to be a professional, to be good at what she does.
But there was a sensuality, wasn't there? There really was something seductive about
which
her.
Then I think is part of her whole tradecraft, which is what they mentioned a couple of times. Like I think the whole part of it is she is meant to be a bit disarming, a bit. Because she says at one time to Denzel something about bad being good and bad or something like that. Like she's like throwing things at him and trying to almost bed him as well, which I think would be again for the ability to get him to do pillow talk and
just going to say
get something out of him.
Pillow talk's a real thing, folks. There's a reason why that word exists or that saying.
Yes, because apparently men, we're very stupid. And if a woman, if we see a boob, we'll give her government secrets. Jesus Christ, men, get it together. You're giving everything away.
Yeah, I loved her in this. I thought she was fantastic. I've seen her quite a few films. It was just nice to watch her again.
It's kind of disappeared a bit, and that's an unfortunate thing that happens to women, especially. Like Denzel's got a career that's going right. So
true. But she did just come up with a movie on Netflix, which I haven't seen yet. Funny enough, with Jodie Foster, who is my favorite actress of all time, is Jodie Foster.
Oh yes.
And funny enough, Jodie Foster was originally approached to do this film. Knowing how Annette did it, Jodie would have nailed it too. So I don't think one would have been better than the other one, though. I love Jodie. So here's the thing: I love Jodie Foster a lot. She's my favorite actress. So not a thing against Annette Bening, but it would have been kind of fun to see Denzel and Jodie go head to head.
Well, you get a chance if you see the Spike Lee movie Inside Man.
Oh yes, of course they were in that. Yes, there you go. I love that film. But Jodie Foster and Annette Bening started as, I think I haven't seen it yet, but it's on Netflix. It's a true story about a swimmer. About I think crossing.
Yes, I can't remember the English Channel or something like that. I think something on that line.
She was nominated for either for Golden Globe or a Oscar for that film. So Annette, like you're saying, she might be not as prominent as she was in the 80s and 90s, but she's still getting nominations and awards. So good for her. She has a total of 10 Golden Globe nominations.
Oh wow! Any wins?
2 wins.
Okay, good.
She has 1 Emmy. She has 1 BAFTA. Oh, she has 5 Academy Award nominations, no wins. Overall, for all the major awards, she has 94 nominations, 26 wins. So she's no slouch in the acting department.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. It's called Naiad. All right. So Jodie Foster was considered for that role, but that's fine. And that was great. And Jodie, of course, I think she's had an okay career. I think she was fine not taking this role.
She seems to have rebounded. I think
She's okay.
She's all right. Yeah.
Okay. Last, is this the best for last? I don't know. Let's talk about it. Bruce Willis as General Devereaux. So what did you think of Bruce Willis in this film, Mr. Bruce Willis podcaster?
This is one of those ones where, again, I don't want it because I do a Tarantino, but I feel that Pulp Fiction has a role to play in this, where Bruce has learned that he can also be a side character and not the main star, because he's not in this much. He pops in the first and second thirds of the film, and then he's very prevalent in the last third of the film.
Right.
I think he does a great job at being a general. Now, one of my favorite moments from him is the speech he gives about do not use this option.
General, the Army's a broadsword, not a scalpel. Make no mistake. We will hunt down the enemy, we will find the enemy, and we will kill the enemy. No card-carrying member of the ACLU is more dead set against it than I am, which is why I urge you, I implore you, do not consider this as an option.
There's been another bombing. They've just hit the federal building. They've all been brought to a hearing. Bill Clinton is the president in the film, but he's not in the film. Like they just use him as like, he's there.
Stock footage or whatever.
Yeah, stock footage. But, so they've got his cabinet people together and they're talking and they're trying to decide what can they do. And they're, I don't know if this is cliche, but they have this like Southern, senator who's like, he just literally, feels like like a really stereotypical Southern person.
Right.
Like, let him loose, kill them all. I don't care, kind of thing. But Bruce Willis's character is asked, and he says, this is not an option you want to use. You do not want to use the War Powers Act. You do not want tanks rolling down the city in New York City. You don't want us doing martial law. Like, it's not an option you want to use.
So he's a complicated character too, because he did announce him like this isn't something you want. So I think people misunderstood his character within the film, that this was something he wanted. This is his own personal war. I think when the order was given, he turns it on and said, this is what I've been ordered to do.
Yeah, he really leans into it once it has been given. Or he's just really good at being like, hey, I don't want it, because the guy's response was, and the president's going to say, then that's why you're the perfect man for the job. So again, we don't know. Is Bruce's character being truthful, or is he being coy and telling them what he thinks they want to hear in order to get what he wants? It's hard to tell.
My theory is just like I was saying, that I think he was telling the truth, that you guys don't want this, but if you enact it, I will enforce it, and I'll be badass about it.
To the freaking T. I will do this to the letter and beyond.
Well, the reviews of this film were pretty much universal across the board in that everyone did what we just said. They praised Annette Bening, Denzel, of course, because you cannot but praise him. He was amazing in this film. And Tony. But boy, the critics were unanimous, and I want you to hear your thoughts on this. They were unanimous, both present day and during the release in '98, of Bruce's acting in this film. They thought it was terrible.
He actually got nominated for
nominated for Golden.
Yeah, for the Razzie
Award.
And he got 3 of them that year. So I think there's something at the Razzie, because this is not the first time. Obviously, on this podcast I do. He was nominated in 2020 for 3 Razzies for the only 3 films he did. Now he lost, but sometimes it does feel like maybe Bruce pissed someone off at some point who does the Razzies, and they pile on. I watched the film, and not one moment last night that I think Bruce Willis was out of place. Now I will be fair and say that I've also watched 20 of his straight to demand video movies. So he is absolutely firing on all cylinders.
What film are you on right now?
We are about to do the 20th, A Cosmic Sin. It's a sci-fi movie. It's the second one in a row of a sci-fi movie.
Here's what you're dealing with, my friend. So IMDb, Cosmic Sin has a rating of 2.5 out of 10 stars.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that tracking for what you guys are experiencing?
Yeah, God, yes. Yeah. We've got 6 films already of the 18 films we did. So the 18th will be coming out probably right around the time or right after before this episode comes out. And of those 18, 6 have got 0 critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So a third of the movies we've watched have a 0 critics rating
the highest rating you have to go has a 4.3.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's but
Holy fuck.
you have to listen to the show to understand.
Oh, I know.
How,
I do.
because it's fun. Like it's a
Right.
when you do it the way we've done it. There's one that got a 0 that we actually really enjoyed, that we gave it, Bruce, because it was fun. But again, you have to watch the stuff we've watched leading up, and we don't try to compare. We're not foolish. We're not comparing this to his Die Hards, to his Unbreakables, to his Sixth Sense, to the 12 Monkeys, to Pulp Fiction, to all the great movies he's been in. That's not fair. It's not fair to him. But I don't think the review of him. But again, I will say I may be seeing this with different eyes because I've been on a different journey for a little bit. So from time to time, I have to watch a good Bruce Willis movie, just so I can kind of, go, that's right, what Bruce does.
But I thought he was good. I thought he was fine. I'm actually surprised that they would even. He wasn't as good as Denzel or Net.
But I don't think he's supposed to, right?
I think they were missing the point of how a general might act.
He's not supposed to be some batshit crazy general because you wouldn't allow him to do it. If he comes in being Denzel.
Right.
Like King Kong ain't got shit on me. If he comes in doing that kind of thing.
Right.
Or if he's that Southern senator and he's like, we should release the dogs and chew them up and spit them out kind of thing.
Right.
Then you'd be like, oh man, this is a very odd performance. But he's supposed to be very professional. He's a 2-star general. His asshole's tighter than a frog's butt, as he would say. There's no water getting in. This guy, he's been there. He's done that. He knows everything what he's doing.
I thought he was just fine. I wouldn't even say just better than serviceable. I thought he was great.
Yeah.
I thought he was.
He's not as memorable as the other ones, but then again, we spent 2/3 of the movie with them before we ever get to Bruce. Right. And Bruce is not meant to go toe to toe really with Denzel. That's not the point of this film for him or this role for him. He's the other piece of the all enemies thing is what happens if we turn the military loose on citizens? What happens if there is a general who has spent too much time in the sandbox, who's got too much skin in the game, who has lost soldiers on the other side? He starts to become the zealots who want their leader released. He starts to feel that same way. Like you can kind of see why he starts to get a little bit loosey-goosey. Yeah. I wish Ed, this is 98. So again, I have to, obviously think about that too. But the torture scene, it's bad, but it's not because we hear the audio, which is fine. But the way it ends seemed very abrupt and sudden and kind of like it was almost like it was forced. We hear the 2 screams and then I don't want to give too much, but you know how it ends.
Sure.
And then I was kind of like, he was shot, but it felt like fast. Like it just felt like,
you know why? I have a theory.
Please do, because it was confusing. It bothered me last night. I just felt like of all the things in the film that were handled pretty well, I felt that I can appreciate them not wanting to show the torture, which is fine. It's 98. Yeah, this is not what Ed Zwick does, right? This isn't this Scorsese or Tarantino. We're going to see it, sure. Right? But that's not how Ed Zwick designs his films. The quickness of which we've got to try to get information. It was very fast. They kind of cut some things on, and we don't know what. That's the great thing about the audio, just hearing him scream. Yeah. But then there's a gunshot.
Well, because he didn't have information. They ended up torturing an innocent man. Yeah. So they killed him. It was a used tissue paper. They threw it out. It was to show you how brutal and uncompromising they are. Like, it turns out it was useless, but we can't have this guy alive and squeal on us. So
that was my thought process too. Is that's what they were leaning without saying it. But
so I leaned towards it was brutal. And it was just the way he just walks out of the room wiping his hands like
that was great.
He just squished a spider. I think there's
it's a dark role I thought for Bruce at this part of his career. Like he's a hitman in The Jackal, so we're not surprised. He's supposed to be this,
but he's not bad in the sense of he's now the war machine. He's like, I've got a job to do. I'll extract information. So you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. He broke an egg here. Yep, wasn't the right guy, but we're gonna go find another one to torture. It was just
As soldiers or as military people, you currently enemy, former. And having been to Iraq and end the war in 03 to 04, this is why you don't televise a war. It may be hard for listeners to grasp who haven't been in the military. And this is why he said you don't want to bring wartime things to a civilized peacetime area. Him saying in that scene, this man's life is not as important. And there's not a single person who's been in the military who would not give that man's life up to keep their buddies safe from learning about, a possible ambush, an attack coming up,
right?
To save, like, it's kind of what Jack Nicholson says in A Few Good Men. There are men who guard the walls, and those men have guns. It's how you sleep quietly at night. Sometimes how freedom is kept, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but this is sometimes where it has to go. Sometimes things that you don't want to know about
you don't want to know about, sure.
And you don't need to know about it. And unfortunately, we're living in a time where everyone wants information when they can't handle it. Well, you can't see it through some eyes. I'm not saying the torturing thing is great. I'm trying to, I don't want.
I know.
God, that guy's he's a war criminal. No, I'm just saying, there are things that happen in war zones on both sides. That are not right. But sometimes when a decision needs to be made, and the decision is always what is the most effective course of action to save the most amount of lives, sometimes a decision like that is made. And if it's wrong, it's bad, obviously, but it's a judgment. And when given the fact that if you look at the totality of the movie, how much is happening, the panic in New York City is fever pitched. There are attacks every other day. It feels like, obviously, because it's a movie, we got 2 hours, so we're going to feel like it's happening every other minute. Time is running out, and you've called this option in to stop more deaths. And you've just had the federal building exploded, which is why now we've got the army on site. It's why we had the army on site for 2-3 years down in New York City while they rebuilt. It's why, there was army in the terminals everywhere of every train station, major cities for a while, why they have it over in Europe and stuff. Sometimes, it's a tough situation, but when you have an enemy that doesn't wear a uniform, this is why this movie does a great job of making you think. It's like it forces the people who have never been over there or have had to deal with this stuff to look at the tough decisions and how much of a Rubik's Cube it really is to figure out how to do this properly and save lives and not take lives that you don't need to take. The person who sits on the couch has never been there will be like, well, how could he do that? And it's terrible to watch and hear. But at the same time, we've all been in places where it's like that in wartime. There have been decisions like that throughout all the history of war on both sides of the fence, for not just the American, but everyone's side, where decisions have to be made and sometimes sacrifices have to be made in order to keep people safe and keep things from happening. And so that's where that gray matter gets. And this is what this film does a great job of. It's like, here's both sides, and how do you want to protect yourself? Pick your poison. Hope that you can change the minds of the people who feel this way, or possibly unleash this dog that has his own ways he wants to do things. So I think that alone, Bruce did a great job delivering that. I would say that anyone who disagrees, go join the military and tell me you don't know a 2-star general like this. They're stoic. They're not going to give their cards away. When the uniform turns from civilian to the BDUs or the camos, there's a reason they're 2-star. You learn quickly they are in charge. And that's when I like when he says to Denzel, you really think you have authority right now? You don't think I'm in charge? I'm not your boss right now?
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you. Okay, are you ready to now hear some words of Ed and some of the behind the scenes stuff here?
Absolutely.
The first clip is Ed talking about just how they got the script.
Linda Obst, a producer with a deal. In 1997, Linda Obst, a producer with a deal at 20th Century Fox, sent me an original screenplay called Blowback. Written by Larry Wright, it was about a group of terrorists who bring a nuclear device into New York Harbor. I demurred, but the spread of Islamic terrorism that was bedeviling most of Europe was something I'd read a lot about. That America would eventually have to deal with the threat seemed obvious to me. In fact, we already had. I met with Tom Rothman, president of Fox, and told him there was a movie to be made from Larry's script. Not a race against time action movie, but an in-depth conjectural look at how law enforcement might deal with terrorism when it arrived at our shores. I assured Tom that it would also have some kick-ass action.
What I like what Ed does is he's always about the character study, and that's what I love about his film. He has all these characters. We've said it before with other films, big cast, but I never once felt like any of the characters were wasted or they're kind of tossed aside. Everyone seems to have a story. He has a great ability to get you invested with each character, from the general played by Bruce to Denzel, of course, and just everyone seems to be important in their arc within the story. And it is about terrorists in the city. It's not, there is action sequences, sure, but it's not an action movie like Die Hard 3 was a terrorist action film.
Yeah.
This is psychological film.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
This next clip, I titled it Inside Help from an Agent.
But as we were being escorted out of the building, a veteran field agent who happened to be a movie aficionado mentioned having liked a couple of my films and wanted to know who might be playing the lead FBI agent. When I mentioned Denzel Washington, his eyes lit up. Love to meet him when he's in New York, he said, offering me his card and scribbling his personal cell number on the back. I asked Denzel to come to New York and invited the agent to join us for dinner. After a few glasses of wine, a couple of Hollywood anecdotes, and an autograph, he reciprocated by proudly revealing just how massive the NYPD's and FBI's counterterrorism efforts had become: profiling, surveillance, wiretapping, undercover informants, infiltration of mosques. Everything we knew to be happening abroad was happening here, with little attention paid to the niceties of civil rights. He went on to detail how terrorist cell members had gained entry into the country by means of student visas, and how their operations were financed from abroad. He even mentioned enhanced interrogation techniques used by the CIA on prisoners held at black sites around the world.
That's a great inside scoop there from that agent. And they used those points throughout the film, showcasing all that stuff, the student visa in particular, and the torture stuff. And so it's amazing. That's what I mean. That's why this movie might have been very prophetic and
precursor.
They had a guy telling them, hey, this stuff is happening on our soil. That's what I like. He's telling this stuff is happening right now here.
Well, I believe one of the hijackers in the got into the country on a student visa. One of the and was on the watch list. Yeah. That's the other thing is one of the guys that they say the gentleman's finger who they find after the bus explodes and to find out who it was, kind of who was perpetrating this. He had been in the country. He got through on the watch list. He went on the watch list. They're kind of figuring out how does this guy on the terrorist watch list make it in? It's eerie to look at this film knowing that this came out 3 years prior to 9/11.
Yeah.
And how close you could tell the research that was being done or the things that were happening in real time, real life that Ed was able to draw from and got some, obviously people like this gentleman he's talking about help him. It's scary that this was happening 3 years prior and we're just all living here in America. It's kind of like cows grazing in the field, not realizing they're about to be turned into burger. It's just kind of we're fine. Everything's good. And all of a sudden, the next thing you know, 9/11 happens and life has not been the same since.
No, it has not.
It's
Here's an anecdote here about Annette and Ed.
I loved working with Annette. In addition to being brilliant, gracious, hardworking, and fun, she wasn't intimidated by Denzel's strength and was willing to go toe-to-toe with him. At the same time, she could always be counted on to find unexpected humor even in the most serious scenes. One night, after she'd finished giving her new baby a 2 a.m. feeding and put her to sleep in her trailer, Annette and I were sitting in our chairs waiting for Roger Deakins to finish a huge lighting setup. "You know, Ed," she said with a mischievous look, "we met 10 years ago." It took me a moment, hoping I hadn't done anything untoward, but then it all came back to me. I'd been in New York casting 30-something and seen Annette in a lovely play called Coastal Disturbances. "I do remember," I said. "You came in to read for Ellen and for Melissa. You were wonderful. Except you didn't cast me." Knowing how well things had turned out for her since then, I had the presence of mind to say, "I know, and you never thanked me."
Well done, Zwick. Well done.
Yeah,
sir.
It's funny how life is like. I know it's so cliche, but it seems to have a lot in Hollywood. As a big example, like when one door closes, another opens. You always hear about that star of a TV show. Like a big one was Lisa Kudrow was supposed to be on Frasier, playing the operator to Frasier's operator in the booth there.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't get the role, and it went to Perry Gilpin, not Perry Gilpin. Is that her name? Yeah, it is Perry Gilpin, I think. Anyway, she's great. I love Frasier, and I love Friends. So I don't know if that would have captured Lisa's the way she is. I think more of who she is the Phoebe character. That shot her to stardom. So it's just interesting how you might think you lost a big spot, and but no, she goes on to one of the number one comedies of all time. So that's why Ed's saying here. It's like, hey, I think you did just fine that I didn't cast you my TV show in the 90s that got canceled after 3 seasons. So you're welcome.
Yeah, he was right, though. Ned did go, as we've mentioned, toe-to-toe with, she stood her own with Denzel. She really did an amazing job.
She did. They did great when they're like yelling at each other and stuff or whatever it was. Yeah, you could tell, obviously, they're acting, but you can also sense the confidence that Annette would have to have as an actress to stand up to Denzel as a person, too, because he's
intimidating.
Like,
he's very, and I'm saying he's intentionally trying to be intimidating, but he's just Denzel. Yeah. He has an aura about him. Yeah.
Strength, confidence, intelligence. Of course it's intimidating. I'm dumb, The next one is a clip about how Denzel, of course, nails it again. think Ed's running out of stories about how good Denzel is.
That's why I stopped working with him.
Yeah, he's too good.
Denzel played the Fed with studied calm, but as the story progresses, you can feel the rage rising inside him until it explodes in a beautifully played aria when he finds a naked prisoner being tortured.
So that was just that clip there about the torture scene, and boy, that was a tense moment of the film. All right, the next clip is about Tony and his first day of shooting. You'll be surprised to hear what his first scene was.
The big surprise was Tony Shalhoub. When I cast him, he had a few days left to shoot on a movie, but neither its production manager nor ours anticipated a scheduling problem. That was before disaster struck his other movie, and it went 3 weeks over schedule. I was crushed. But there was an alternative to recasting him. Tony just had to finish work on his other movie by 4 p.m., get to LAX by 5, take the red-eye to New York City, arriving on set with us at 3 a.m., never having met me, tried on a costume, or rehearsed the scene, then, in sub-zero weather, shoot a scene that had to be completed before dawn, which also happened to be his character's most dramatic scene in the movie. In the scene, he looks desperately for his son among those Arab Americans who've been rounded up and imprisoned in a stadium, finds Denzel, and tears into him. Tony nailed it on the first take. A heartbreaking performance. It's one of the best scenes in the movie. The crew, knowing what he had pulled off, burst into applause. Tony Shalhoub is the epitome of a money player.
Wow.
Feel that praise.
I mean, that scene is amazing. It's heart-wrenching. It's really the moment in the film where things flip. Like you start to see things from, which is great about the film. You see things from two perspectives. Listen, anybody out there who's having a tough time figuring out how to motivate yourself, a man finished a film, got on a flight, had to run to LAX. I've been to LA. It's not quick to get to LAX. Get on a flight. This is, he's on a flight. He's sitting with other people. He's sitting with people who are, whatever. And he's flying across the country. He's losing time as he flies across, obviously, because he's already 3 hours behind New York by the time he flies. So he's losing hours to get to New York. Gets to New York, getting out of JFK or LaGuardia is a freaking nightmare. And then he's in freezing cold weather, got to go in and then do the most intense scene with never even working with Denzel yet.
Yeah.
Now, how good are both those actors? Because if you told me that, now listeners hearing this, see that scene and go, this is the first day that they are standing together.
Yeah.
They do it in one take.
No rehearsal.
They say happy accidents. The stress of all the things he had to do to get there helped, because now he's already got this anxiety that, you know what I mean? He's probably able to tap into that to now be looking for his son, which another great thing. If you think about this, he hasn't even met the guy who's playing his son.
No.
so there's no, you know what I mean? So like he's literally can in his mind go, I've got to try to figure out which one of these people is my son. So he can go from cage to cage looking for someone he thinks might be playing his son, and he has no idea. So that's kind of just another element. But man, that's what the great thing about movies is. We always forget they're not shot sequentially. They are shot.
No, they're not.
If you see Iron Man and he's in this room and he's in it 7 times in the film, and there's 7 different times, they shot it all in 1 week, and he had to be told what is going on. He had to get into a mindset. So acting is, people think it's just so easy, but it's not. Like when you shoot films out of sequence, it's pretty impressive for Tony to first shot be the most pivotal moment of his scene, which is after all the other stuff. And now he's got to go in reverse. He's got to forget all this and forget what's coming. And just what great job. I mean,
well said. Yeah, I agree.
And that's why Tony was probably the perfect guy to be the second to Denzel.
Yeah, he was great with Denzel. Absolutely great. All right, this next one talks about Bruce. And I want to hear your thoughts about what is said here. And this also will explain.
Oh man, is this Bruce's another Matthew Broderick? Oh no,
not as bad.
Okay.
No, not as bad as Matthew. I mean, Bruce was 43 now, but we got to keep in mind Matthew was like barely 21 or 20.
This is true,
but he was just a kid still.
What a nightmare of a mother! Holy shit!
After listening to that recording of that episode and the audiobook that we drew from, I came to the conclusion, like even afterwards, like I think the mother was just manipulative. I think if the mother wasn't the B word, it would have been a different story. Like I think the mother kind of controlled Matt a little bit too much. Okay, here's
modern day Annie Wilkes. I'm surprised Edward didn't get his legs tied to the thing and broke his ankles to change the script for him. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So This is interesting. There's a reason why Bruce is in the film. Listen, there's a reason why Bruce is in the film the way he is and how much he is, where it might even seem shoehorned a bit.
Okay.
Check it out.
Okay.
Tom Rothman decided we needed more star power. He convinced me to cast Bruce Willis as the general who imposes martial law in the city. Come to think of it, I'm not sure he really gave me any choice if I wanted him to greenlight the movie. Anyway, I had known Bruce since his days as a bartender at Cafe Central, and I had worked with Demi on About Last Night. They were married the year after that film came out, and Liberty and I had had them to dinner at our house. I figured I could make it work. Bruce flew into New York only hours before shooting. Unlike Tony, he wasn't prepared, and his performance was wooden and uncomfortable, as if he'd stepped off another set and onto ours. Paul Attanasio had come on to write some brilliant but difficult dialogue for Bruce's character, and despite my best efforts, and perhaps attributable to the aphasia I and the rest of the world would learn of much later, Bruce barely managed to stumble his way through, and the authenticity of the third act was irreparably hurt by his performance.
Wow. So strong. Now, Ed, he's human. He's not always right. This is his story, his experience. But there's two things he says at the end that I was like, oof, like, really? So one, I don't think his performance was as bad as he's saying. I'm wondering why he's throwing not Bruce under the bus a little bit, but because it's not a perfect film. I don't think he's mean to do it, but I think there's a part of him that's echoing what the critics have already said. So he's kind of safe to do it, that Bruce was the weakest link. And though he may have been, as far as, compared to Denzel and Annette and Tony, but he wasn't a weak link. He might have been the weakest, you know what I mean? But like he might not have been. But again, it was more than serviceable. I think it was fine. In fact, it was good to see Bruce out of his typical type of character. I think he played the wooden general persona very well. I think that's how I took the performance. And then the other thing I found surprising that Ed said, talking about his mental disabilities back when he was 43. Does it show that early? That's a little bit of I thought that was odd to talk about that 25 or 30 years before it showcased itself. What do you think of that?
So he's there, he's filming. You've got Tony Shalhoub who's just done something amazing. You've got Annette Bening who's killing it, and you've got obviously Denzel Washington. He's now in his third film with him, so he's already got some people who are killing it. And
I think that's what
Bruce,
it was.
And if Bruce shows up and is not prepared, that's on Bruce. So that's a fair criticism.
The film is already happening, so I think they already kind of had their team spirit. They had all this A-list type of acting quality going on. And Bruce kind of comes in, not Bruce Willis.
But someone's got to be the straight man in the film too, though, for a little bit, right? Like, so, Tony's doing a good job up until we do initiate martial law, and we've got to take his son. So now Tony is he's being pulled in two directions. So his character has to have a reaction. We already know Annette Bening's character is being pulled in 27 directions. Like Denzel says to her, you don't even know who you're fucking, and then Denzel he's our hero. He can go up and down wherever he wants, right? We want his range. We want him to be soft when he needs to be soft, loud when he's loud. That's why we're watching Denzel. We don't need Bruce to add a fourth person who's lost their shit. He loses his shit when he needs to, like towards the end. But we need someone to be a stalwart. Like he's supposed to be a stalwart. However, I will say something else has happened, and Ed Zwick is being very, very kind or keeping it quiet. Something else has happened, because the last part he has said is twofold. And it's twofold. One is it is a shot at Bruce without it being too, on the nose, but there's no way Asia was bringing it 43. I'm sorry. If you watch the journey I'm watching, you can see when it's starting to peak, and it's around 2018, 2019. It really starts. You go, oh shit,
that's sad.
It's getting. I mean, because when you don't know, you can watch his acting, you go, oh god, this is terrible. But he also knows that since he has the aphasia, one, he's not listening to this. Two, he doesn't remember anything that's happened. So it is a little bit of a cheap shot, maybe down there. Maybe Bruce did something to him. I don't know. And Ed's going to be polite enough to know, like, look, I'm Ed Zwick. He's Bruce Willis. It's like going against Taylor Swift. Like, I know that there's more people who are going to come for me if I'm a little too neat to Bruce Willis and really give up the information. Yeah.
Yes,
but the aphasia was kind of like that was a little bit of a low blow. It was a little bit of a low blow.
Yeah, it's odd that he did nice. He was 43, so I don't know because he did some incredible films after that. Still, there's no way. I think this is weird that he brought that up.
Maybe Bruce didn't want to be in it. I was just like, fine, I'll just do this. I'm gonna get a good paycheck. They want me in it, and maybe he got something off of it. Clearly, he and Bruce never buried the hatchet for wherever the real issue was, like he did with Matthew. But listening to your Glory episode and listening to him talk, fucking Matt's mom is far more a pain in the ass than whatever Bruce did to him. And he was being like polite as best he could to her because he knows maybe Matt will listen to this one day.
I think
and like in this one, he's like, well, Bruce is never going to listen to it. So fuck, I'm going to cut out his knees. He's never going to say anything. But he was kind of like really real cagey. He wanted to call her the C word. And he just was very nice about not doing so. I just thought it was a little weird that he would then like in that clip attack Bruce in that manner, like, but under very professional, but it's a very passive aggressive attack on him. It's kind of like, well, you know, look, I'm not saying anything against him. Maybe the aphasia. It's like, wow, the aphasia speaking through. So you're saying that Bruce didn't have his mental faculties back then?
That's what I mean. I thought it was odd that it mentioned that early. He's 43 at the time.
I mean, because he would a year later, he's doing The Sixth Sense, and then he's coming out a year later in Unbreakable. Like he looks like he's in full capacity in those films. So
I think it was odd. That's why I found the oddest thing to bring. I think Ed might have just been.
Hey, and you know we don't know. He was look. I'll give him credit. He didn't give up the dirt. He didn't give up why he feels this way. And so
there's probably more to the story,
enough.
more of the antics on the
there's more to meet the eye. It's a Transformer situation here. It's more than meets the eye.
Because of Bruce's current condition, this is a fairly new book. I think as like let sleeping dogs lie, the poor guy and his family. That's it.
Yeah, the aphasia thing probably could have been whatever. Whatever.
It might have been his way of saying he sucks as far as I'm concerned, but we'll just blame his medical condition.
Yeah. It was dog shit, but I'm pretty sure it's the aphasia was speaking through 25 years earlier. Holy shit.
Anyways,
crazy.
All right. Here is some early reviews of the actors from critics.
The movie played well in previews despite some audience resistance to Bruce, so often cast as the out-of-control action hero now playing a buttoned-down senior military officer. Denzel and Annette were judged fabulous adversaries. Tony's performance was regarded by all to be deeply moving, and the depiction of our country's reaction to the arrival of terrorism on our shores was strong and unsettling.
So again, just that echoing of the reviews. Poor Bruce.
But I think he also names the reason, right? Like,
he's funny. Meant to play a woman general. Yeah.
And we're used to him. Like I said, even in Pulp Fiction, he is an unhinged boxer a bit. He's, all these movies he's been in, he's always a guy who, like a Denzel. Like if Denzel was playing a quiet accountant, and he doesn't have like a Denzel moment where he gives a big speech or he has a big explosion or does something, we'd probably be like, oh, is Denzel quitting acting? Is he not caring anymore? So when you're used to Bruce, the action star, who is just, so this is what, 98? So is this the same year that Die Hard 3 came out? 95. It was 95. So 3 years earlier. So we're used to, we've got John McClane in our head. Right. We've got all these other things he's done. So yeah, I can understand why people think that Bruce might be mailing it in, but at the same time,
Armageddon was also 98. There we go. Armageddon
okay. So he's playing, he's playing all these Bruce typical roles, and now he's a quiet guy who does, which he would also then lean into in 2 movies he does with M. Night Shyamalan, because he leans into the quiet private investigator type when he plays in The Sixth Sense. He's not a big boisterous guy there, and even in Unbreakable, he's a very shy, unassuming security guard. I guess maybe if those movies had come out first, people might have been like,
maybe.
"Oh, this is Bruce doing something different." Again, I'm not trying to save Bruce from
it's fair. That's why I brought John. That's why I brought John.
But at the same time, I do feel like Ed kind of maybe had hit the nail on the nose when he said that people aren't used to Bruce being this wooden, buttoned up, very serious military guy.
Fair, yeah.
I mean, look, if you look at some of our military ones, you've got Patton, that's not a button down guy. Even when you watch Saving Private Ryan, we get to know them so well. But technically, Tom Hanks guy would probably be a button down type of guy. He's a former English teacher. Teacher, in the movie. There's more to the story of why Mr. Ed Zwick and Bruce Willis didn't get he's at loggerheads with him because of whatever happened. I don't know.
Here's some more early review talk.
But after a couple of early press reviews, I began to feel some foreboding about the story's reception by the chattering classes. I sensed resistance from both left and right, one side fearing the stereotyping of Arab Americans, the other objecting to the heavy-handed portrayal of law enforcement. The one thing everyone seemed to agree upon was that a major terrorist attack on Manhattan was implausible.
Wow. Well, how are they wrong about that, eh? This will never happen, they said.
Jesus Christ.
This will never happen, they said.
This film has, again, Ed Zwick would probably prefer this film to be something that no one remembers and stumbles upon because someone tells it, as opposed to it having a legacy that's kind of, whether it wanted to be or not, is tied to 9/11. It is
it can't help but be that.
Yeah, it's a precursor. It really is and that's why we watched it, right? Which is bizarre, as we're heading up to guard the Pentagon as it's getting rebuilt.
Hoo-ah moment for you guys. Hoo-ah, let's get going.
It's kind of like, but you're sitting there watching it and you realize it's 3 years early, and you're kind of like, holy shit! Like, it's a movie, but sometimes art imitates life, and this time life imitated art in a far worse way because there's that one overhead shot. And again, look, the CGI or the effects from 98, especially when I'm watching it on my home television, even though it's 4K, when they do the overhead shot of like what's supposed to be like the crater of, and I think it's trying to emulate what happened. It's trying to emulate what happened at
the Oklahoma
at Oklahoma City. Because that's the biggest thing we can think of, right? So it's just and even in the footage we see from the barracks blowing up, it's always a car bomb that blew up the side of the building, so you can kind of see it ripped open. Even that is still it's eerie, like it's eerie, and you look at that and you go, my God, there's a crater. The thing was huge where Ground Zero was. It was just
right.
This is such crazy. An eerie film that how close they got some of this to be right, and how. I mean, it was a forewarning that it was trying to tell the American people, and people just really weren't listening. Like it really was trying to tell like the enemy that you think is the enemy, their reasons are different than you really believe them to be. And as Annette Bening says, the person who has the most almost balls is the one who wins. The one who blinks last is the one who wins. And, as we found with some of the terrorism that we dealt with, they were willing to blink last. And that's why those 2 buildings came down. Even though this is just a movie, we had the first attack on the Trade Center in 92, and then you had our home attack of 95 when it was Oklahoma City. And I think America just was like, this will never, as they said, this will never happen to us. It's never going to happen. And we now know what really did happen. And just watch this movie again was just so like, it drummed up so many different feelings and thoughts that I hadn't had in so long, just like reliving, like it was like a time, it almost like it's like going back to a time before something's happened. It's like before the dawn of the cell phone, now all movies have to deal with the dawn of like, especially smartphones. Right. This was the time of like before terrorism was really a thing here. It was always something that was somewhere else. You guys had to deal with it. I remember, was it last year? It was ended up being a reckless driver, but someone ended up hitting the toll here near Niagara Falls, and and everyone thought, oh my God, it was a terrorist attack, but it ended up being someone who
two party people,
people, a little drunk, and they disintegrated themselves against the barrier. But I remember there was a lockdown. Your border, the border between here and by New York and you was shut down. It was just our people, your people. Everyone was kind of like on asshole pucker tight high alert. And then once they finally realized and they got the camera footage and they realized it was just 2 partiers who just either didn't see it or I don't know what the hell they're doing, but then everyone was like, okay. But it was big news. It was big news in Canada. It was big news in the United States at the same time. We thought, was something, something new afoot. We wouldn't have felt that way back in 98. We've just been like the people in the film, like, it's not going to happen.
That's right.
We're invincible.
And this last clip is some of the pushback that was felt.
The demonstrations were small, but on a slow news day, the message resonated with the first stirrings of journalistic wokeness. Here was yet another Hollywood exploitation film turning an oppressed minority into villains. The film critics liked Denzel and Annette, hated Bruce, and were mixed about the movie. The box office was okay. The studio received several bomb threats and posted armed guards at the gate. Bedford Falls received word through a contact in the CIA that our office was being targeted. It wasn't really, we eventually learned, but only after we had security for a couple of weeks.
There you go. Interesting times for the filmmakers, for the studio, for Ed. What a time. What a
brought
time.
in the word wokeness. That was impressive too. He's 2 for 2 on on the Siege one. He really bringing them all out. I wonder how, again, I'm sure he's very diplomatic for the most part on what he wanted to say.
He did write a letter. He wrote a letter like a what do you call it? Not an apology so much as he expressed like about the film. I think he wrote it. I think it was published at the time, but he reads it in his book. It's really well written, and I think it explains his feelings on the film overall, why it was made, the thought process behind it, and all that good stuff. Yeah, it's what an interesting time for Ed and for the crew, and it's hard to believe, Scott, that his next film is The Last Samurai.
Well, he's like, look, we're gonna go back in history where I can't offend anybody apparently, or prognosticate something. I know.
You got the Scientologists to play a white samurai. How dare they? Yeah,
I know. I know.
So, Scott, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me on again. I appreciate it.
You're the perfect guest with your military background, with you being, just your time and place in history during the time and place of this movie and the events after with 9/11. It was a great insight from your experiences with that. And of course, you're the Bruce expert on our Last of the Action Heroes podcast network. You're the Bruce expert doing the Lord's work, those films at the 3 out of 10 star films that Bruce, poor guy. Again, where can people find you?
So you can find me at the Church of QT pod for my Church of Tarantino. You can find me at the Cheeky Bastards for our Men of Action, and at Dropping a Bruce for all the 40 run of Bruce's straight to demand stuff. And we're almost halfway there. So we still got another year and a half to go. Yeah, it's still a long slog.
Sure. No, you don't want to rush it. You don't want to rush it.
It has been fun. Like, yeah, some of them are crappy movies, but it's given us a new appreciation on movies, and also kind of the ability to, sometimes you got to look at a movie for what it is and not go into it thinking everything is going to be Oscar worthy. Not every movie's made for that. If we cover on stuff on the Last of the Action Heroes podcast network, not all those films are meant to be, great movies, but there's a time and a place and a nostalgia to them. And I don't know, just film is fun, good, bad, whatever, indifferent. It's fun. So that's what we try to do, is have fun.
Edward Zwick, he so far with the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 6 films that we've covered on the series so far, we're almost halfway done his filmography, if you can believe it. Speaking of halfway, so far no stinkers.
Yeah,
he's good films. These are good films. I mean, we're 6 films deep into his filmography. Will The Last Samurai be the first stinker? Find out, folks. Find out on the next episode of Zwick's Flicks. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining us again.